All right, it's great to see you, everyone, on this wonderful Tanya Tuesday. We've got a great discussion ahead of us, and I would actually say you will actually be surprised. I think last week's topic surprised a lot of people on the Tanya's thoughts and opinions on uh, intention and how it's one part and parcel of the mitzvah and why it's important. In other words, it's not important because we think it's important. It's important because God thinks it's important, and that a mitzvah is truly made up of a body and a soul, which is intention and the deed. And it's so just like a body and a soul becomes one unit, a mitzvah is one unit when both of those come together. And so um, that was last week's discussion, and that's why it's so important to uh, do a mitzvah with intention, and also not to have intention, not do a mitzvah. Because if you have intention, if you have good thoughts, and you don't do the mitzvah, then you have a soul without a body, which obviously doesn't do anything. And if you have intention without, if you do a mitzvah without intention, it's like a body without a soul. But this is all God's intention. It's not because one is we decide is closer to God. It's because that's what God decides. God decides this is what He wants. He wants a mitzvah, and God's will of a mitzvah should be body and soul should be the actual deed and the intention involved in it. Um, So again, the intention is not valuable in it because we find it meaningful, though we do find it meaningful. The intention is valuable because God finds it meaningful. And that's why it's so important that intention has to be done with a mitzvah. Because if the intention is not done with a mitzvah, then God is not finding it meaningful, and then it doesn't really accomplish much. So that was last week's discussion. So this week we're going to delve into what does intention actually mean. We've skirted the issue. I've said different things, but really I have not given you really the Tanya's view on intention. And you will actually, I would say, be surprised on what the Tanya views the intention, the intent of a mitzvah to be. And so that is going to be today's discussion. We've been discussing one has to do a mitzvah with intention. Well, what is intention? That is the intent of what I intend to talk about. Um, okay, so with that in mind, let us start like this. So they tell a story. There was one time a chassid, a follower of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, and he was speaking with the younger Hasidim, and he was speaking to them about the importance of contemplating, thinking, meditating about God, the Adaita, knowing God. Okay, and he was using the word. He was using the words from the verse. It says in the Torah, the Adaita Yom, you should know today, V'aslevota elav v'vecha, and put it into your heart. Ki Hashem Elokim, because the Lord is your God. So he kept saying via daita. The verse says you have to know God. He kept telling them you have to know and you have to learn and understand and meditate. And he's explaining to them the idea of what does it mean to know God from all the different angles that one can know God from. As he's talking for a while, eventually the door opens and the Rebbe walks out, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe walks out, and he sits there and he says three words. He says, "V'hashevota el levavecha," and you shall place it to your heart. Meaning you've been talking about the beginning of the verse, which says, "V'yadaita yom," you have to know God. But the next words in the verse are, "V'hashevota el levavecha," that you have to bring it to your heart. In other words, it's good, it's great to know God, but you have to take that knowledge and bring it to your heart, to your feelings. And this is going to be today's discussion, is not only knowledge, but actually feelings. So Judaism obviously has all different areas. We have the knowledge, we have the Torah study, and we have feelings. And this is going to be what the ultimate crux of this class is going to be. It's not enough to know, but you have to actually feel it. Okay, that's going to be where we're going to lead you to today. And within the feeling it, there are two ways to feel. There is a way to feel like a human being, and there's a way to feel like an animal. Okay, so that is going to be our discussion today. Our discussion today is going to be to understand. Let's put it like this, actually. So I said we're going to explain intention today. What we're actually going to explain today is we're going to explain action can happen on two levels. Action can mean physical action or speaking, and intention can happen on two levels. Intention can happen on a level of, which we'll explain intention means feelings, but intention can happen on two levels. It can happen in a animalistic way or a human being way. And both are actually going to be good. But that's really what we're going to get. So again, in the previous weeks, we spoke about the importance of intention. This week, we're going to explain you what actually is intention. And so we're going to start off in today's discussion. Tanya is going to jump right in and is going to say, basically a mitzvah. Sorry, before I say that, let's go like this. Let's ask the question, because I keep skirting the issue. Okay, so if I would normally ask you, what does it mean to have intention when you do a mitzvah? So let us say the mitzvah that you're doing is prayer. Okay, I would ask you, what does it mean to have intention during prayer, to have kavanah? What does it mean to have intention? What would you say? What would an answer be that you would say? And feel free to unmute yourself or put in the chat. But what would you say does it mean to have intention? Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Someone pick.
I was going to say it's really like reading the prayer verse and understanding what you're saying. And that's really what I feel like is intent.
Good. So one option is understanding what you're saying.
Right. And
Okay.
I think you need to be in the moment. You need to be concentrating and doing that prayer and understanding why you're doing it and being in that moment with God at that time.
All right. So understanding why you're doing it. And what's the answer? Why are you doing it? You gave the answer. I'm just want to.
So you're again trying to. It's a mitzvah, number one. You're doing it because you want to do it. You're in the moment doing it. It's all these things together.
Got it.
And you do it because you should do it. I mean,
right. So one answer is right. So this is level number 2, is knowing you're doing a mitzvah. And the third element of it is knowing, being aware of God.
Right. Being in that moment.
Right. Okay. So these are, if we want to say the three, sorry for the misspelling over there. These are kind of the 3 layers of what we generally consider intention. Number 1 is obviously knowing what you're doing. Right. So whether, the actual deed, what are you actually doing? So if it's a prayer, you have to know what the words are. Number 2 is knowing you're doing a mitzvah, right? You can know the words of the prayer, not knowing you're doing a mitzvah, right? That's also possible. And finally, the awareness of God. One can truly read the words, know what they're saying, but be so focused on getting it down right and understanding it that forgetting about God. So we need to think about God. So that is generally what we would consider intention. However, the Tanya actually is going.
Rabbi,
Oh yes, someone else.
just one more comment.
Yes.
The intention is to connect, and so that takes Kavanah.
Right. The intention is to connect, which would be kind of level number 2, knowing you're doing a mitzvah. Correct. Knowing you're connecting, 2 and 3 kind of together. Correct. Kavanah is knowing you're connecting. Yep. No.
I guess the point too, though, is that like you can routinely say the prayers every single day, but and so what that might mean is that you may understand all the words you're saying. It may not mean that, but it could. It also, may suggest that you're you're a bit more focused on what you're doing, but that still doesn't necessarily mean that you're connecting with God. I mean, so it's do you understand it? Are you kind of, as someone said, are you there in the moment? It's a lot of different elements. And that's kind of the rationale behind saying the same thing, what appears to be over and over again, every day, every week, because people have a very difficult time establishing that connection.
So you're saying not every day do you actually get there to be in the moment.
Well, right. I mean, and to really establish the connection with God, that's a pretty high level of going through an activity and getting something from it. And it's something that you don't, people just don't reach that very readily. getting distracted or whatever the case may be, not understanding, going through the motions. I mean, there's just a whole lot of elements of that.
Right, or a busy day, or you're worried about work, or whatever else it is.
Right.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So these are all, elements of the mitzvah. And like you said, you're not always successful in getting there. Well, now, just in case anybody feels, no, not the word is not guilty. In case anyone feels inadequate, we'll give you another layer that you need to do that you might also not reach every single day. The Tanya is going to add like this: the real layer of Kavanah, the ultimate layer of Kavanah, is not what are you thinking when you're doing the mitzvah, but what is causing you to do the mitzvah. Okay? What is causing you to do the mitzvah? That is the soul. If you think about it, a soul is really what's making it alive. Life is not just, in other words, knowing the words, knowing what you're saying, knowing that it is a mitzvah, knowing that there is a God, if it's all in the mind, is all technical. Feeling a lot of these things, feeling that we are standing in front of God. People talk about being in the moment, feeling that the desire to want to connect to God, feeling to want to connect to God. That is much more than the knowledge part of it. In other words, it's very possible that all these intentions still remain very much in the mind. And we want that there should be a soul to it. For it to really be a soul, it needs to be felt. If it's still in the mind, it's cold. The mind is very cold and calculated and logical. So if I logically know what I'm saying, and I logically know I'm doing a mitzvah, and I'm logically aware of God, that is still not really kavanah, says the Tanya. In order for it to truly be kavanah, in order for it to be a soul, to give the mitzvah life, you need to bring it to feeling, something that's making you want to do that mitzvah. Okay? A feeling of love, a feeling of fear, the awe, right? Generally, we don't do things for anybody else unless we have feelings for them. And or if you have ulterior motive, of course, that's a possibility too. So it's also possible, by the way, someone can actually do all three of these things I wrote here. You can understand what you're saying, knowing you're doing the mitzvah, and you're aware of God, and yet you're doing the mitzvah for a third reason. You could be doing it for honor, you could be doing it for money, you could be doing it for habit, and you could know all those things in your mind. But so why are you doing the mitzvah at the time? You're not doing it because of your feeling towards God. You're doing it for an ulterior motive. Tanya wants the kavanah means real kavanah, to be the soul. If we translate kavanah as a soul, so intention is not really the greatest word, right? Okay, because intention sounds like it's a mind thing. Okay, but the ultimate kavanah, according to the Tanya, is going to be what is making me do this mitzvah right now. And ultimately, if I'm doing the mitzvah for an ulterior motive, even if I know that I'm connecting to God at the moment, then the drive to do this mitzvah is not for God. It's not the desire of awe and connection to God. It's like just think about we get back to relationships, right? If you do favors for your spouse and you know what you're saying and you know that you're doing something good for them and you're aware that they're your spouse and you understand how important they are to you, but truthfully you're doing it for an ulterior motive, then the life, the soul of your action is self, So that's what he's going to. This is where he's heading to. This is where he's heading to. So he's trying to what he's saying. What he's going to say is that the intention, truthfully, is the feeling, and in feelings itself, as he's going to explain, there's feelings that are based on the like animalistic feelings, and there are human feelings, and both are actually going to be good. But we'll find out. Let us first take a look at some text where he's going to tell us again that mitzvahs are split into 4 sections. Okay, 2 sections are the action itself. There's going to be the, corresponding to the 4 levels of life that are in the world: inanimate, vegetation, animal, and human being. So the level of inanimate is the deed of the mitzvah. The level of vegetation is the speech of the mitzvah. The level of animal is the animalistic feelings, and the level of human being is the human being feelings. So let's take a look. So he says like this: The degree of illumination in the mitzvahs is also divided into 4 levels, 2 in the mitzvah and 2 in the kavanah. For in the body of the mitzvahs themselves, we're going to be at page 446, and the mitzvah acts, which are, we're not doing the bottom, which is more in depth, which are corresponding to the category of inactive objects, the purely practical mitzvahs, which involve actual physical objects, and 2 corresponding to the plant kingdom, the mitzvahs observed to the combination of speech and thought, such as Torah study, recital of the Shema. Sorry, I don't know why it's zooming so much. It doesn't let me zoom a little bit. I don't know. Such as Torah study, recital of Shema, prayer, grace after meals, and other blessings, which have the physical component here. It works. Okay, which have a physical component speech, also have a more spiritual component thought, like plants which generally motionless, physical, do not show signs of life spiritual. This was something we said earlier. We said you should know, even mitzvahs of Torah study, for example, where you have to use your thought process, that doesn't mean you have kavanah, right? In other words, you cannot consider yourself studying Torah if you don't know what you're saying, right? That's clear, right? So in Torah study, if you don't know what you're saying, and if you're studying Torah, you know what you're saying, that is still not considered kavanah. It's not really considered intention, right? That's like the deed of that's the deed. The deed of Torah study is to know what you're saying. And to a certain extent, we can say by prayer also, the deed of prayer is to know what you're saying. That's not the intention. That's what it is. Okay? That's what the action of Torah study is. And to a certain extent, what he's making an argument here as well is other mitzvahs as well. The so to speak, the technical action of sitting in a sukkah is to know you're sitting in a sukkah and connecting to God. The deeper level, the soul of the mitzvah, is why you're doing it. So that's what he says. And the kavanah of the mitzvahs, to connect to God, which is like the soul of a mitzvah when compared to the mitzvah act, is its body. This kavanah is also subdivided in 2 levels corresponding to the 2 levels of the soul found in the physical bodies, namely the souls found in the animals and the humans. Okay. So before we go to the next section, which he's going to describe these 2 levels, we need to explain. We need to understand. So first of all, does everyone at least buy into this idea that the deepest level, he's calling it kavanah. In other words, he's basically saying, knowing what you're saying, knowing that you're doing a mitzvah, being aware of God, at least in your mind, are all technicalities. Okay? So let's say I stop a guy in the street. I say, would you like to put on tefillin? He says, what is tefillin? I say, tefillin is a mitzvah that God commanded us in the Torah to remind ourselves of the exodus of Egypt. And it's a commandment from God. And he puts on tefillin. So the person is putting on the tefillin. And all those intentions are very technical. Definitely for him, because he's never heard of it before. Okay? And I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. But then sometimes you see those people, they put on the tefillin, and they start crying, and they're awakened in their soul. They feel connected to God. That is what the Tanya argues is the true kavanah. Okay, yeah, you told him it's a mitzvah. He's standing in front of God, but the real kavanah is when that person opens up during that mitzvah and feels that connection to God. That's what the Tanya is arguing is the real kavanah. So we can read books all day about what is the meaning of a mitzvah. Right? So let's say it's coming up, it's coming up Passover, and you understand all about Passover. It's coming up Hanukkah, you understand all about Hanukkah. As long as it remains in your mind, it's still technical. You have to have that feeling of God, as the verse says, V'yadaita yom, you need to know, Vashevota elovecha, and place it in your heart. God desires our hearts as well. Now, here's the question. How can we say that a mitzvah requires feelings? In other words, I can tell you what to do. How can I tell you how to feel? How can I tell you how to feel? How can we say that God is telling us we must feel something? What if I don't feel it? What if you don't feel it? Okay, if I'm making the argument that kavanah means not just technical intentions, but feelings, how could there be such a commandment? Any thoughts? The Tanya discusses this at length in the beginning of the Tanya. Anybody remembers? How can God demand of us feelings? Anybody? The whole Tanya is based on the verse, by the way. There's a verse. Yeah. Yes.
Does he demand of us feelings, or does he desire of us feelings? Demand is a strong word. I mean, I think he desires for us to have feelings to be closer to God. I think that he desires us to do mitzvahs that we feel compelled and happy to do. But I don't, that word demand is such a strong word. Maybe it is the right word, maybe it isn't, but I demand lots of things and get nothing. But I'd rather desire something and maybe it happens.
Got it. So one of the main verses that Tanya is based on is Kikaro ve'lecha davar ma'od. This thing is very close to you. Beficha in your mouth, uvilvavchen in your heart, la soto, to do it. So yeah, it's a good question you're asking about demands. He definitely asks of us to use our heart.
Right, of course.
Right.
He wants us
Right,
to
you're right. Demand is a strong word.
to feel connected. He wants us to feel something in our heart, in our mind, in our body that we're connecting with him. The whole purpose of the last 2 years have been talking about that.
Correct.
I mean, it's not like you're introducing a new concept here, I think, personally, because it's something that when we do something, we want to do it. We want to make it meaningful. We want to connect. We want to do all these things that you've been talking about, and then feel something from that. You always talk about davening on Yom Kippur.
Right.
You feel and you feel all day long. You're feeling. That feeling is extremely important. I think that's what God wants, but he wants us not to just have it on Yom Kippur. He wants us to do it in our everyday life, every day, if you could, every moment of every day.
Yeah. So you're right. This is not a new thing that Tanya is telling us. What's new for the chapter, what I'm trying to point out was new for this chapter, is that Kavanah is feelings. That's a new point. That's something most people don't realize. In other words, sure, he's been making the case to have feelings the entire Tanya. The novelty here is what most people, I think most people wouldn't say it. Anybody doesn't learn Hasidic philosophy would not necessarily say Kavanah is the feelings. You got to know what you're doing. You got to know what you're doing. You got to know it's a mitzvah. You got to understand. They might get into feelings, but it's not really what you think of when you think of Kavanah. But if you think of Kavanah as feelings, it makes having feelings when you do a mitzvah that much more important. In other words, Tanya wants to really say Kavanah. Sure, maybe the word demand is a hard word because you cannot force it, but it's very, very, very much asked of us to do. So my question was, though, how can we say that? How can God, if God really expects us to get there? I mean, what if we can't make that feeling? What if that feeling is not coming to us? So the Tanya addressed all this earlier, and the Tanya basically answered, the key to the heart is through the mind. And so we need to spend a lot of time thinking, meditating, and working to try to bring it to our heart. Tanya had a chapter that says, what if it doesn't come to your heart? He said, at the very least, you tried. He said, at the very least, you tried, okay? But to not try, that's wrong, okay? But at the very least, it's demanded of us to try to use our minds to get to the feelings that God asks of us to have. God obviously understands. If you try your best and you can't get to the feelings, okay, but do the mitzvah deed, of course. So that then what the Tanya explained was, if you try to use your mind as best as you could, and you did the deed, God will consider the missing step for you as if you did it. Okay? Because you tried at the very least. You tried to use your mind. But this is what we're getting to. The main point is that we need to use our mind to awaken our heart to have feelings towards God. That was the whole beginning of Tanya. Now, if we recall, the Tanya actually explained to us that there were 2 ways that we can use our mind to awaken our heart. Anybody remembers, what are the 2 ways that we can use our mind to awaken our heart? So again, if the mind is the key to the heart, the mind is the key to feelings, what are the 2 general pathways that we can use our mind to awaken feelings in the heart? And just while you think about it, just to recap, what am I saying here? What we're saying, what the Tanya is arguing here is, in order to truly have intention when you're doing a mitzvah, means to feel you love God or feel you have awe of God. That's what it means to truly have intention. Therefore, obviously, it's demanded of us. We must, this is actually demanded, to try to create feelings. It's not demanded us to have feelings, because that's impossible, but it is demanded of us to try to create feelings, which means we need to use our mind. And what are the two general pathways with which we can use our mind to create feelings towards God?
Being aware of God.
Okay, good. Yeah. Anything else?
Would one of them be through study? Because once you read about something, sometimes you get that feeling from reading and learning something new.
So study of what, though?
The
You're not
Torah?
wrong. Well,
Oh,
not necessarily, because if the goal is to have feelings towards God,
hmm
general Torah study may not give you that, right? You
hmm
need to really study about God, right?
Yeah.
So you're correct. Just we have to specify. So Maimonides writes in the beginning of his book. He writes, "What is the pathway to love God? When a person contemplates, when a person will contemplate about everything wonderful that God does. So being aware of God, studying about God. So we need to. The answer is, what's the key? The key is to contemplate, meditate, think about God, and that will awaken within us the feelings towards God. As I always say, you don't have feelings towards something you're not aware of, right? And someone who's never had chocolate cake will not have a desire for chocolate cake, right? Now, if I meet someone who's never had chocolate cake and I explain to them about chocolate cake, and they've never had it, so I can't explain to them chocolate cake, but I can explain to them different flavors they may have tasted, then they may become to desire chocolate cake. So the same thing is, we don't see God. In order for us to have feelings towards God, we need to think about God. We need to actively take time out of our day to think about God. And in thinking about God, there's many different meditations we can do about God. There's different arenas in our meditations about God, as the Tanya specified earlier. Some of them could be about how great God is compared to how insignificant we are. So one thing is focusing on the greatness of God, right? Just as a person is like awe-inspired of greatness. Why do you have so many teenagers following all different idols and people they follow? They're inspired by greatness. Okay. Another opportunity is thinking about how much God does for us personally. It's another avenue of thinking about God. So again, there are all different ways of thinking about God. However, this is all I said earlier. There's two ways to create feelings. This is all one layer of creating a feeling. In other words, where I'm literally creating a feeling. I have to work on myself. I have to think. It's not natural. Naturally, I love myself. I need to spend time. A human being has the capacity through their mind to create different feelings. Let's give an example. Let's say many of us, I think, have grown up. There were certain foods we liked, and now we hate them. Maybe it was caffeine, candies, whatever it is in your life that you felt was unhealthy for you. At a certain point, you probably switched to hating it. We have that opportunity, the ability to change that. Similarly, just another example of where the mind is the key to the heart. Children are sometimes not afraid of things they should be afraid of. Why? Because they don't understand it, right? Their mind has not taught them that this is something to be afraid of. Fire is not scary. Electricity is not dangerous. And cars are fun to run into. You know what I mean? So, the mind is the key to the heart. And when we're talking about God, we don't see God. So we need to actually think about God in many, many different avenues, understand very well, and then allow ourselves to feel. You have to obviously have an understanding before you can feel. That's the idea, is we need to understand, meditate, and hopefully bring it to our feelings. However, that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of time. As you may know, you gotta work hard. You gotta exert your mind. Meditation is not easy. Learning the topics about God is not easy. It's very confusing. God is not simple to understand, and we never truly understand him anyways. So, but this is why there are so many Hasidic discourses explaining God, so we can have different angles to think about him. Okay? In other words, if you just think, oh, God is great, he does a lot of good for me, you got to get more detailed in order to really change how you feel. A detailed thought process. But that is all one pathway, a deep meditative process about God understanding him with the intention to bring to feelings. Then there's another way to create feelings with our mind, and that is using our mind to awaken feelings that we already have. Say it again, that is using our mind to awaken feelings that we already have. So we explained in the second section of Tanya, starting from chapter 18, that just as there's a natural love of a parent for a child, and I'd like to say children for parents, let's say, right? There's a natural love. Similarly, there is a natural love to God within our hearts, without us having to work on anything, without us having to create it. There is a natural love to God deep within our hearts, but it's in the subconscious. And so we need to have different meditations, not to create that love, but to reveal it. And so that's what we explain. That's why we have so many Jews who may be so far away, but can come back so easily, or suddenly feel connected to God, or you do a mitzvah with them, they break out crying. How is that possible? That's because deep within our hearts, just as a parent has this innate love for their child, and a child has innate love for their parent, we have this innate love towards God deep within our souls. And so instead of creating a feeling for God, we can awaken a feeling that is already there. Now, of the two, which one is better? A feeling that you create, or a revelation of a feeling that's already there? Which one would you say is greater? In whichever way you want to define greater, better, effective, however you want to, what do you think? Do you think, creating a feeling or revealing a feeling? Which one is better? Any thoughts? Nobody wants to jump in.
I feel like creating a feeling may be better, just because I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I feel like when you create something, it might feel, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like it might take more work to get to that point.
Yeah, it's more mature. It's maybe a word you're looking for.
Yeah, more mature.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. Anybody else? Okay. So yeah, it's good. So obviously, something that you don't have to work on, the feeling that's always inside of you, you can never lose it. So that's the benefit of that love. Okay. So we know we always have a fallback, but the love that we create is much more mature. It's something you created, it's something you worked on, and everyone knows that anything that you work on yourself is going to be much deeper. It's gonna be longer lasting. It's going to be a much greater love. That is why, by the way, the love of spouses, is kind of like that, right? It's not a natural love. It's one of the beauties of the love of a spouse, of a marriage, is it's not an innate love like a parent to a child. Something very special about it. It's the love that is that one creates, and over time it becomes greater and greater. It has a certain element that is even greater than it's a much more mature love. It's a much more mature love. And putting it in the context of what we've been saying till now, there's a love that is considered animalistic and a love that's considered humanistic. Now we can understand where I'm heading to. The love that is innate in us is like an animalistic love, right? Just as animals don't work on their feelings, they have feelings, and they become revealed at different times in their life for different reasons. The feeling of love towards God that we have that's innate to us would be considered our animalistic godly love, which in this time is a positive, by the way. It is a positive. It just means it's innate. It's nothing I worked on. It's like an animal. Animals have feelings. They have big feelings. I can have big feelings towards God, but I didn't work on it. And as they say, easy come, easy go as well, right? If you don't, it can head back to the recesses of your memory very easily, right? That's why we sometimes have people who suddenly get inspired about Judaism. They show up to Chabad. What's happening there? Their innate love towards God is revealing itself. But if you don't pull them in further at that moment of inspiration, very often they slack off and they just move on, right? They really need to work on studying and creating a love towards God that is not just their Yiddish and Hashem, their Jewish soul. right? If we just rely on that Yiddish and Neshama, it comes and it goes. We need to get them to get to the love that they are going to create themselves, that feeling and that relationship that they're going to work on, that mature relationship and connection, and that is the one that that we all try to seek and desire when we have the time. And this love that we create can take us through a longer part of our day. And that's the love that we are that we really are aiming for. So to recap, what does kavanah mean? What does intention mean? Intention means what is making me want to do this mitzvah? What is pushing me to do this mitzvah? What are the feelings that are making me want to do this mitzvah? And that, so we need it. The answer is we should be having it. We should be doing the mitzvah not because we want honor, because we want whatever side reason we want. We should be, or because we do it every single day. We should be doing a mitzvah because we feel a love towards God. And we want to do something for Him, or we feel an awe towards God. We don't want to disappoint Him. What are the ways to have those feelings? One way is tapping into our innate love and awe of God. And the deeper way is to meditate and think consciously about God to the point where we create feelings of love and awe towards Him. And that is the more mature layer of love. That is the love that is, in a sense, really longer lasting. Let us take a look here in the text as he tells us all these ideas. It says like this.
Hey,
Yes.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So would an example of creating be like a lot of people start to lose their way in religion when something tragic happens, like if a family member passes away? Would you say that working on understanding why, took this person away from you or other tragic would be more mature? Or would that be more of like the innate love for God finding its way back? If you're trying to understand.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people lose their faith when a loved one passes away. A lot of people find their faith when a loved one passes away. Right? It works both ways, which is interesting. It's really, and I think both of those, the initial reaction, are not the mature layer in either way, right? We need to work on the mature layer of connection to God, and it's hard. So, as it pertains to the specific question, if someone has a loved one that passes away, they need to level up their connection with God. And I obviously, I'm not judging anyone that loses their way because of a tragedy that happens. But the answer is correct. You need to deepen your level to God. In other words, you can sustain your connection to God with your innate love towards God. But even your innate love towards God requires work. It can be your fallback. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the natural feelings we have towards God. I think actually sometimes in a moment of tragedy, that is what we fall back to. And then we need to rebuild it. We need to rebuild it over time. Maybe a new connection. We might have lost the original connection. We need to rebuild a new connection. Understanding why bad things happening is really just a technical thing to allow us to move past the questions that we have. And of course, obviously, we know that we don't have an answer. It's really understanding that there is no answer. It's really the answer when something terrible happens. Just by the way, talking about if people want to be inspired, if you watch the Chabad Rabbis Conference, there's a video in there, beautiful story about a young child who suffered something terrible. It's worth it to watch. I put the link there to watch the banquet, but you can also watch that specific story. It might give some it's definitely a good, let me see if I can find it. That story was there. I could tell you where it is. It's about 2 hours and 50 minutes in, so you should watch that video. The main conference starts at 1 hour 50 minutes in and 2 hours 50 minutes in. 10-minute section, definitely worth a watch. Anyways, all right, let's go back into the text here. So he says like this. He says, Tanya will now describe levels 3 and 4 more detailed. Level 3 and 4 of having intention, which, as we said, is really feelings. For if your mental disposition is good, to think about God, to contemplate His greatness, so that your powers of Bina cognition give rise to a higher reverence in your mind, and the love of God in your soul's right chamber, so that your soul thirsts for God, to connect to Him, through observing Torah mitzvahs, which pull the blessed infinite light down to illuminate your soul so as to connect with God, And it's with this intention that you study Torah and you do observe mitzvos. So he's explaining here the deeper level, right? This is where you create, where you contemplate about God, and that creates, you're creating feelings of love and awe towards God. And because now you have love towards God, your soul's thirsting towards God, and therefore you want to pull God into your life. And if with this intention you study Torah and do mitzvos, and it is with this intention that you pray, and doesn't want to go to the next page. And it's with this intention that you pray and recite blessings. Oops. Go back here. Then the level of Kavanah, this level of Kavanah, doesn't want to go in this time. I'm sorry. I wish this thing would. Then this level of Kavanah can be compared to the highest of the 4 categories of human. Since a human has intellect, free choice, and speaks intelligently, and you have engaged these higher, uniquely human faculties in your Kavanah. This is the ideal of level 4. And so practically towards us, what does this mean by that? Because we're reading this. Practically what this means is that not only do we need to study Torah, but this is why Chabad Hasidim, before we pray in the morning, we study things like the Tanya and other books that speak about God, okay, to create feelings towards God. This is the idea. It's not enough to just study Torah in general. We need part and parcel of Yiddishkeit is to have feelings towards God. In order to have feelings towards God, we need to study about God. Because Maimonides himself writes, so it's not just a new thing. Maimonides writes, if you want to have feelings towards God, you got to think about God. Now we will turn to level 3, a lower level of Kavanah based on the discussions in chapters 16 to 25, corresponding to the intellectual properties of an animal. And he says like this: as for someone who is weak in ability to think about God and contemplate the greatness of the blessed infinite one. So again, you don't have, it's above you. Or maybe you're not there today, you're not feeling it today, and his powers of cognition won't give rise to palpable love of God in his heart, nor a reverence of God in his mind, nor a fear of God in his heart. All he can do is recall and awaken the natural latent love in his heart, and bring that love out of its hidden latent state, so that even if he can't inspire his mind to palpable emotion, it's at least conscious in his mind, so that the will of his mind and the hidden places of his heart are in full and absolute agreement with complete authenticity to actually give up his life to affirm God's unity if put to the test. We explained in those chapters, when we spoke about the latent love of God is very powerful. It can even make you give up your life for God. That's why we explained. We said there's so many Jews who are non-religious who gave up their lives towards God, right? How is that possible? Obviously, there's a latent love towards God. So we're not dismissing this love. It's not to be taken lightly, and about it, it's not so easy to even reveal. And this theoretical willingness to give up his life is seriously contemplated so as to have enthusiasm to attach God to his divine soul and that's the wrong way. Let me see what happened to that last page. To have let me read from the book. In his garments, so they can be absorbed in God's unity and oneness. So again, we're saying that this thought process can give you the feelings. Oh, I know, I didn't refresh. So this thought process can give you the feelings that are required to when you do a mitzvah, which is done with the garments of the soul, right? What are the garments of the soul? Thought, speech, and action. When you do a mitzvah with the garments of the soul, that will be done with great feelings of love towards God. In other words, if you tell yourself, I know that I am willing to give up my life for God, right? So if I know I'm willing to give up my life for God, then then that means I really love God. You know, that's what it means to awaken your innate love towards God. Okay? So that they can be absorbed in God's unity and oneness, which is the divine will expressed through Torah study and mitzvahs observance, as explained. And as we have learned, with this latent love is also included fear, to accept God's authority, not to rebel against him, God forbid. Anyways, so his point is, and with all the above Kavanah, meaning with the latent love, which we explained again at length in chapters 16 to 25, he turns away from evil, does good, to study, pray, and recite blessings. But since he is unable to arouse emotion for God, he contemplates only the translation of the words without any palpable fear or love in his mind. Okay? So what we're saying is, it's not a deep level of emotion when it's not the mature level of emotion. Okay? But it's still a level of emotion. This level of intent can be compared to the soul of an animal that has no substantive intellect or free choice, and all its emotions, which are the fear of things it deems harmful and the love of things it deems enjoyable, are merely innate and not the result of its cognition or thought. This is analogous to the natural latent love and fear in the heart of all Israel, which are inheritance of our patriarchs, similar to the natural instincts of the soul, as mentioned above. So what he's saying is that, again, when we're doing the love of God that is in chapter 16 to 25, we are being like an animal, which in this case is not bad. This is not the best, okay? We're being like an animal, meaning we are relying on our levels of love towards God that are natural towards us. So let's just take this practically. Some people have a more natural spirituality. Some people have a more natural feeling towards God. And if we consider that the soul of a mitzvah is an integral part of the mitzvah, it's the engine that's driving why you're doing the mitzvah. And as he'll explain soon why that's important, he'll continue to explain why it's important, okay? So don't think we're done with the concept of intention. Intention, we're just getting started, okay? But if intention is that important, then the greater the intention, the greater the mitzvah is, okay? And as he's going to explain, the more, if the intention is the soul of the mitzvah, then you want your mitzvah to have more soul. Okay, so if you had the opportunity to give your mitzvah an animal soul or a human soul, you'd give it a human soul. So sure, I can rely on my latent feelings of love towards God when I do a mitzvah. And I have no choice many times when I'm in a rush. But if I have an opportunity to spend time to think about God and create feelings towards God, then my mitzvah will be shining with a much greater soul. This is why it's instructive sometimes when you read, you read stories of tzaddikim, righteous people, and how they do the mitzvah, and how they're shuckling, and how they're the intention and the feelings they have, and it's inspiring, and it inspires us to also do that mitzvah with that feeling. Just imagine, you're lighting the menorah, and right, Baruch, I know I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm lighting the candles, it's commemoration of the miracle, Baruch Atah Hashem, da 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 da. When you see, like, you hear the stories of these tzaddikim, these righteous people, or some people, it's a powerful moment. There's stories of just to tell you the story. There's a story of the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe. They tell a story. We have a mitzvah on Pesach, before Pesach, to check our house for chametz, to check our house for leavened bread. Now, today it's very complex to check for bread because we have so much food all over. Back in the day, it wasn't such a big deal, though their houses weren't as clean. But they tell the story, the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, he spent the entire night checking a studio apartment for chametz, the night before Passover. How is that possible? What took him so long? Because he felt God at that moment. He felt the connection to God at that moment. It wasn't just an action to get over with, to technically do. It was an inspired moment of connection with God, which can take a whole night. The inspiration lasts the whole night. It was a whole night. So the lesson is, of course, practically, is that it's not enough to just study Torah subjects, to study Chumash and study Rambam, or whatever Talmud, whatever we study. If we're not going to study things that discuss actually God himself, we are going to be missing out on a very important part of doing the mitzvahs, which is the soul of the mitzvah. And this is Chabad Hasidic philosophy, is all about the soul of what we're doing. You might hear we say doing Judaism joyfully. What you're getting today is the real inner story of Chabad. The inner story of Chabad is inspired individuals who work to inspire themselves and then ultimately inspire others. And we are inspired with the awareness of God. We are not just, we're on a mission and we know what we have to do, and these are the technical actions we need to do. We should be living Judaism inspired. And Judaism inspired, of course, means knowing what the mitzvah specifically accomplishes, but even more general, how it connects us to God. What are the feelings that I have when I do a mitzvah? And as we're going to explain in the next chapter, that the more soul that is in the mitzvah, the more connected it gets to God. That's really what we're going to get to next week. the more soul that you put into a mitzvah, the more connected you're going to be to God. And that's going to be chapter 38. It's going to describe how far your mitzvah can elevate. And that is why when we start off this whole discussion of intention, there's a famous story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov one time walked into a non-Hasidic shul, and he said, I can't walk in here. It's full of Torah study and prayer and mitzvahs. And so they thought he was giving them a compliment. And he said, no, it's not a compliment. They did the actions. They studied well. They did all the actions correct, but there was no feeling towards God. And as such, the mitzvahs around there was no soul. They weren't elevated. They were stuck. They were stuck in a synagogue. So I couldn't walk in. It was full of mitzvahs that were stuck here. That didn't go to heaven. So, you know, I think sometimes maybe, you know, people want to know what is the uniqueness. You know, many Hasidic groups can teach you, many Jewish groups can teach you Torah. But you have to come to Hasidic groups to study about God. That's really what the uniqueness that we teach here at Chabad. And many other Hasidic groups do it as well. But Chabad obviously has a unique flavor in this. But this idea that proper Yiddishkeit, proper Judaism requires feelings towards God, which requires studying about God. And the study of God is found in Hasidic philosophy. That's really where it's found. Kabbalah, you're not going to understand. What is Hasidic philosophy? Hasidic philosophy is taking Kabbalah and taking it in ways that we can understand God. And I want to say one more thing on this idea. Is I always say Tanya is actually the book that explains to you why you should study the other Hasidic books. In other words, the Tanya itself really doesn't delve deeply into the study of God himself. It does a little bit because it has to, but actually Tanya alone is not enough. Tanya is really just the beginning. It tells you need to study other elements of God. And that's why you may have seen when we studied about the holidays, when I gave the master class on the holidays, it's all Hasidic ideas, really delving into what's happening in heaven when we do the mitzvah, the connections, and it all really it always boiled down to God. All those discussions boil down to God. And that's true, real, you know, Hasidic philosophy. So if you have the opportunity to study Hasidic philosophy beyond the Tanya, that is good. And I guess you can look at your rabbi and say, why don't you teach more of it? I should probably. Obviously, all my teachings have some of it, but we should do more. We should do more. Anyways, thank you for coming. I'm wishing you to inspire yourself to be more present when you do a mitzvah. Think about God, and most importantly, create feelings towards God, and have soulfully inspired mitzvos, that what is pushing you to do the mitzvah is a deep feeling of love and reverence towards God.
Yashikoa.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.